they can look back and go, we had this many grievances every year forever, and that was just our life. We were just fighting all the time, and we've seen a noticeable reduction, and we can count that. It's gone from 10 to none.
Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast on all things law for businesses in Queenstown. Today we've got an amazing guest. We're super excited to have him on board. We've got the founder of MyHR with us today, Jason Enor. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're delighted to have you on board.
Very much, yeah. We thought we'd start off, Jason, talking about who you are and what your background is. I sense a bit of an Australian accent in your accent. So tell us, who are you and what's brought you to Queenstown?
Yeah, thanks. I'll try not to give you a life story and put all of your listeners and viewers to sleep. So I founded MyHR 9 years ago. It's my business, and I left a corporate career to do that. So my lead up into being a founder of business was through 15 years of corporate human resources, where I started in Shell, actually, in the UK. I did my postgrad HR study with them. I worked there for about 4.5 years on the south bank of the Thames, came back home to New Zealand. I think of New Zealand as home, and worked for a German multinational called Henkel, then Sky City, and then I was the national HR manager for Dick Smith, the retail chain, when they were making money and were a great retailer. Sadly, that business was sold and it didn't go so well. And then from there I worked for the Woolworths Group in Australia for 3 years. So my background in human resources is what I call the pointy end: employment relations, industrial relations, large-scale restructures, union negotiations. I love the law, but I could never be a lawyer. I love to leave that up to you and experts in that field. And I'm fascinated by human relationships. And what I saw was the work we did in corporate wasn't really replicated in small business. There was this gap between the awesome work you do, but at a very high and costly level because it's needed, and then these free DIY services that were incredibly average, to be honest.
Yeah.
And in between there wasn't much, and it really creates risk for small business. So we've essentially created the HR department for the small and medium enterprise. So yeah, that's how I'm qualified to be it. Prior to that, I actually studied to be a primary school teacher, believe it or not.
Really?
But I never taught. I just could not do it. And even before that, I was a musician, and I still play drums today.
Really?
So yeah, I have a passion for drumming, and I still play.
Yeah.
So
good
yeah.
stuff.
Excellent, very
And
good.
you know, the MyHR sort of response to this insane number of small to medium-sized businesses we've got in New Zealand and Australia, it's been wildly successful, you'd say.
It has, yes, indeed. And it's been, we are classified as a bootstrap startup. So for people who are not familiar with the startup or software as a service terminology, it means we didn't go out and raise a bunch of capital off a bunch of rich people or institutions and then use that to fuel our growth, burn it, run at a loss, raise capital again. We always had a view that we wanted to be a self-sustaining, profitable business, somewhat old-fashioned, but it was key to us and our success because we were building something new and unique. We didn't really have any benchmark competitors, so we had to be certain it worked. We assumed it would, but we didn't know it would. We launched with no customers, no revenue, and a half-finished software platform. So our goal in the first 3 years was to achieve profitability, or break even actually, and do so with a 90% or above client retention rate. So client satisfaction and financial success were critical. And so that was hard graft, those first 3 years. And then years 3 to 5 is when it started to turn. And then in the last 4, it's just taken off because people get it. And yeah, growth in New Zealand's been phenomenal, and it's just starting in Australia.
It's a really interesting example of a startup being successful, because startups are obviously the hot thing in Queenstown especially, and it really goes to show that it's not necessarily just having this super idea and then raising a bunch of money. It's actually the hard graft and figuring out what problem you're trying to solve and how to make that into a business and growing it on an evolutionary sort of way rather than going for a grand kind of production is actually, there's a lot in that, isn't there?
100%, and that fundamentally comes down to delivery, and there's some great quotes around about it, an idea is nothing without execution, and I think every kid in the 80s, I'm an 80s child, grew up, I'm a bit older obviously, we all invented the flying car, but none of us have made a flying car, so we can't claim that, so ideas are cheap.
Yeah.
Yes.
But taking that out and turning that into something meaningful is really where it happens. And yeah, you're right. The startup buzzword and the startup buzz community is full of fluff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But within that are some amazing ideas and some awesome founders, and it's about connecting with them and seeing them grow.
Yeah.
So,
So for listeners that potentially don't know yet, what is MyHR in sort of a few words? Is it a plug-in HR, software? What is the service that you can provide?
Yeah, good question. We describe ourselves as an HR platform for small and medium-sized business. So what is a platform in our world? It's a combination of software and human services, and that's what makes it quite unique. So we have built our own human resources software platform, which does what you would expect. It stores employee records, it manages performance reviews, leave, notes, reminders, training tracking, integrates with payrolls, does all the things you'd expect from an HR system. It runs reports for you. But importantly, behind that is another piece of software that we've also built that manages all the HR workflows. And that plugs into my team. And they're all employees, they're not independent contractors. They range from HR graduates through to business partners and HR managers. And they can therefore connect to our clients and run issues from basic admin. So we write employment agreements for all of our clients. We do not provide templates. We write all the pay review letters at pay time. We help them with policies and job descriptions, right through to supporting them through disciplinaries, restructures, or daily questions. I think prior to coming on, we were talking about some of those classic examples of just the random phone calls. Can I take bereavement leave for my dog's death? Am I owed this public holiday because I worked in the cherry orchard last week, but I'm not there this week and there's a public holiday? What are these kind of random little questions that pop up? We provide the outlet for that because we become the HR department for these businesses.
So who is MyHR for? Is it for bigger business, smaller businesses? Where is your sort of sweet spot?
Yeah, really good question. And it's the key for us is it's a business that either has no in-house HR support or one very stretched person. So our marketing persona for that individual is the lonely HR person. And they're often an admin manager, an executive assistant, a payroll person, and they've had all HR lumped on them. So those two scenarios, you have nothing or you have one person, we come in and provide something really valuable. Our smallest client is 2 employees, our largest is about 700. To be fair, the sweet spot zone we think is in terms of 20 to 200 because there's ongoing regular needs. We do have nearly half of our clients by count are less than 20 staff though. So it applies, we call it the small and medium enterprise sector, SME, and that really is up to 200. And in that zone, we work really, really well. Yeah.
Really interesting. So the basic idea of it is that you're building intelligence into these various algorithms that are running processes that an HR manager would ordinarily expect. And you can update those with the latest law, and there's also massive efficiencies in creating documents and things like that.
100%. So we're able to tailor our documents to our clients' needs. So it's not one employment agreement that goes out to all of those 27,000 MyHR users across all industries. There are agreements that are tailored to the needs of the pizza delivery driver, the scaffolder, and the pharmaceutical compounding research development person. So we can tailor that on the back of that technology. We run a ratio of 1 HR person to every 2,000 employees versus a normal sort of corporate ratio of 1 to 100. Without compromising on the tailoring of documentation. And so it provides something to the small and medium enterprise sector that's incredibly unique because it's very tailored and very, very cost effective. So keeping the cost down and manageable was part of it because a lot of these businesses are margin tight and don't think to spend money on HR as a priority.
So what are the sort of considerations that a business would need to make before engaging you? How much of a commitment is it are they turning over their whole HR department to you and then?
They are. So the considerations are, we always, when we engage and we ask what are your top 3 HR priorities, it's a classic sort of sales intro question. And invariably it's, I'm worried about the current state of my documents. We had them reviewed 5 years ago and I haven't done them. So I feel like I need a refresh. It's been on my to-do list and I just haven't got around to it. Sometimes there's an issue that exists. I have this trouble employee and I do not know where to go. And then the third one is often around, we're growing and we're in a tight labour market and we want to get better at this. We don't want to just hire, pay, fire.
Yeah.
We want to talk about engagement and we want to talk about management and run performance reviews. My staff are asking me for benefits and performance reviews, and I don't really get this stuff. You know, I run a development agency, or I run a plumbing company. How do I do this? So you are turning that over to us. We don't want you to come to us and go, here is everything, just plug it into your system, because we are the system that we are creating a better world for you.
Right, yeah. And in a competitive employment market, you really need to be ahead of the game. If you're not ahead of the game,
Totally.
you know, before you know it, you lose a few key staff and that can affect your whole business.
Mate, 100%. And this is key to... to me, this is the start point of engagement, and I'm a critical sometimes of the HR profession that gets a bit carried away with the fluff, the slides and the pinball machines and the offsites, and we're going to go running in the mud, and that's all wonderful, don't get me wrong, some of that stuff's cool, but if you don't get the basics right first, that counts for nothing. And so engagement starts right at recruitment. Are you quick to respond to your applicants and go, hey, thanks, I'm really glad you're interested in our company, but you're not quite right for us, or hey, we'd like you to come to an interview, and you're following up quickly. Then when you make a verbal offer to someone, you back it up with an employment agreement that reflects what you've offered. How many times do people get their employment agreement and they go, oh, you said I'd get a bonus, or you said there's a car, it's not in here, and the business owners go, oh, don't worry mate, just trust me. It's like, no, I don't trust you, I don't know you, I'm quitting a job where I'm well paid to come work for you, and I don't see the terms reflected here that you promised me. And that distrust is sown at that point. These are the early indicators of good or bad employment relationships and engagement. Get that right, onboard them, make them feel welcome, be there on their first day, you know.
Absolutely. And in many ways you're setting the standard of what you expect of them as an employee.
Totally.
If you give them a contract and it says her instead of him all the way through.
Exactly, 100%.
It's just it's scruffy, and that says a lot about you as a business and what your expectation is of those that employee.
Yeah, you spelled their name wrong, and then they write a sales proposal and spell a client's name wrong, and you call them out for it. They're like, well mate, you couldn't get mine. You know, like what is the standard you've set? Lead by example. And that's really where we help. So we're clear, we own the space around compliance and admin, the boring stuff. It is boring, we make no bones about it, but it's critically important to risk mitigation, but also seamless business operations and the foundation from which you build a good company culture. And we can help you do that. And then once that onboarding is done and we're running the performance reviews, you've now got a regular check-in cadence. Just checking in with your team, whether you set it for weekly, fortnightly, monthly, 6 monthly, whatever works for you. And it's that communication, particularly in this market, that is gold, because we're seeing a lot of resignations, a lot of walkouts, so no notice period given, just people getting up and quitting. And I think if you're connecting to your people more regularly, you're aware of that before it happens.
So in terms of the compliance, I mean, you've very much hit the nail in terms of those nuts and bolts. What about, you also mentioned briefly before, one of the second kind of priorities for some of your clients are that help when things go wrong. Where does MyHR step in if there's an employment issue that needs to be resolved, and what's that like approach? So we're really clear, our purpose, we have vision, purpose, values. Our purpose talks about empowering our clients to do what they need to do so they can focus on what they do best, which is run their business. So empowerment is key for us because we are a remote service. We operate through our software and over the phone. We have offices around the country, but we don't go to site, and the price point reflects that. So we will support a client through that empowerment model, and we will support them to the level that they are comfortable at. And if we see risk, we will call it. So what I mean by that is there's no strict rule around what we do and don't do. We can help with a disciplinary that's based on basic underperformance and might result in a formal written warning. We can support a disciplinary process that's a serious misconduct matter that results in summary dismissal if the client is comfortable leading the process. And so what we provide, because we have all the history, the discovery is easy for us. We know, oh, here's Jason, he's been here a couple of months and he's never turned up to work on time, and he sort of smells of alcohol, and now he's had this fight in the factory, and all that history is sort of there for us. We know the employment agreement is signed. There's some robust policy in place around workplace behaviour and expectation. We can provide the client scripts and letters to go into that meeting and sit down with Jason, the terrible employee, and go, here's where we're at, here's where it might go, here's the letter that outlines that in a way that's compliant with the Act, and you go away and get some advice, and let's have a chat tomorrow.
And so we have some clients who are practiced at that, and as long as they know that we are keeping them on the straight and narrow and saying the right things, they'll run that with us in support.
Yep.
And we have other clients who go, I just don't want to, I'm actually a little bit intimidated by this guy,
Yep.
or his dad's the head of the union, and
Yep.
they're all coming in, guns blazing,
Yep.
at which point we call our dear friends in the legal community and we go,
Yep.
hey, we've got a client referral for you. They want someone in the room. They need some help.
Yep.
So we don't pretend to replace professional services. We're plugging that gap that exists between your professional services and this kind of free universe of weird DIY that never really helped anybody, you know.
And that in itself
Yeah.
is just such a huge risk reduction measure. You know, you see things call past your desk and you just think, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's where, honestly, and it's good for lawyers and clients too, because when you pick the case up, you're going, okay, there's history here. I'm not on the back foot. I can help this client navigate this without going, mate, this is a disaster.
Yeah, keep
you
it
know?
clean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
from a client's point of view, they just feel there's a lower level of anxiety going into it,
Yep.
and they know you can get about your work. And that's the role we play. That's where we see ourselves. And so the level of complexity is largely driven by the client.
Yep.
But yeah, there are certain things that we won't touch. Obviously, if you need an investigation,
Yep.
we're not in a position to investigate, and not at our model and price point.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a commercial lawyer, so I don't really do a lot of employment, but Alice does a lot of employment, so she can speak to this point more than me. But it sounds as though the successful resolution of a dispute partly depends on how you deal with that dispute, but also depends on having your ducks in a row before this dispute even occurs, and that's really where you're offering a lot of value.
Totally. And so often you see, if you read, when you're employment law nerd like me and like Alice, I'm sure when you read the cases that come out in the ERA, so often it failed before it really started because they were coming off some base that just was not appropriate. And classics are the 90-day trial period termination, where it was clearly invalid because there was either no signed agreement, or it was signed after they started, or there was no trial period clause in there. These basic things. From that point on, the arguments that were being made were really to mitigate the loss. The employer was never going to win.
Yeah.
And it's that stuff. The other part is the human relationship piece. That ability to deal with stuff and catch stuff early. With that example I used about me, the pretend employee being late all the time and then causing a problem. If you're calling that stuff early and fronting me on it, then I may just go, this isn't the workplace for me. I can't hide out and turn up late. I'm just going to move on. So you can manage things through good human relationships that don't always require formal process.
Yeah.
But as soon as you trigger formal, you want to know you're backed up.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that formal gets ugly and we need to engage the lawyers and get this going and move it on,
Yeah.
it's so much better if that stuff's done.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned before, Jason, investigations, and that's an interesting topic in itself. Probably
yeah.
could have a whole podcast on
We
that.
could, yeah.
How often do you find, given your exposure to such a significant number of clients, how often are you referring clients out to get those external investigations, and in what kind of context do you look at it and just go,
So can I tell you, in the last 6 months, way more than in the 8.5 years prior.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Like incredible. It's just gone whoosh, and it's mostly behavioural. So
Yeah.
people losing it in the workplace. So
Yeah.
what we're trying to determine is this a product of 2 years of COVID? There's this now, what we're calling internally, we're talking about this accelerated burnout. You've got all these people who have come off 2 years of lockdowns and changes and all the kind of mandates and things that have been going on.
yeah,
They're feeling burnt out, and they're seeing some relief, hopefully more to come around the restrictions.
absolutely.
But instead of getting a breather, they're walking straight into this labour shortage, and we're all being required to do the job of 2 or 3 people.
Absolutely.
So workloads are going up and support is reducing at a time where people actually need that the most. That's resulting in either these walkouts I talked about or this behavioural stuff. And by that I mean people losing it at work in ways they never have before, and saying and doing things that are quite alarming
Yeah.
that will trigger an investment. It's not just a F this and throw my book up in the air. It's
Yeah.
heavy stuff, and an investigation is required because multiple parties may be involved.
Yeah.
And behavioural
Absolutely.
stuff, huge spike.
Do you think there's another factor which is such a strong labour market, people feel a certain complacency about having a secure job, and maybe they think, well, if I get fired, big deal, I'll just go down the road.
It's a really interesting question. So there's a number of things going on with exactly that at heart. So what we're seeing is more resignations with no job to go to.
Yeah.
That never used to happen.
Yeah.
But people going, actually, you know what, I'm just going to quit and back myself to get a job out there. So that's happening. Your point around, I'm just going to behave badly and if I get sacked, I don't care. I think we're not seeing that maybe quite that deliberately, but we're definitely seeing this increase in people going, yeah, it creates a security layer that you haven't previously had. So it's, I feel a bit hungover, maybe I'll just sleep in for another half hour and turn up to work, you know. And then the response to this is really interesting. So there's an increase in this behaviour, there's a decrease in disciplinary.
Yeah.
Right.
Because employers are going,
yes.
60% delivery is better than 0.
Yes.
So my line of acceptance is coming down because if I exit this, or if I lean on, it might not even be an exit, it might have just been a, look, here's a warning around continued lateness and we'll put a performance improvement plan in place and I'm going to just turn the screws a little bit because, man, I need you to front.
Yeah.
They're going, well, if I do that, he might quit and I'll never be able to replace him. So I'm going to accept 80% and then maybe 80 is like 60 and maybe 60 is 50 because that 50% is it's better than 0 and I don't believe I could replace this individual. So really, really interesting dynamic around that at the moment. And then wage inflation. People are just fronting their boss going, I want more money.
Yeah.
I've been offered this much down here or from Australia or,
And your service helps people out through that by giving them strategies, for example, to deal with those various things, and there's different ideas for how to deal with a disciplinary matter that might not necessarily be to front somebody.
Totally. And sometimes, and that's where I, as an HR professional, where I've always seen the distinction, you know, between HR and law, and it's this human connection piece. You know, we as HR people should not litigate, get involved in it. HR people that think they're super fancy employment law, you know, they just park it. You know, what you've got is a human connection. What you guys have got is the law knowledge and the ability to execute that like machines, right? And we value you for that. This stuff is the gold in what we do. We're the outlet for that employer to ring up and go, what do I do? This guy is a problem, but I can't afford to lose him. And we might not have the answer, but we have the ear, and we have the empathy, and we have some ideas. So we go, how about this? How about that? How do you feel? Yeah, what do you reckon? Well, and allow them to speak about, well, how great is the risk? When does the seesaw tip? When is you accommodating this guy's behaviour actually more of a problem than just exiting him entirely? Because I know it'll cause some pain from a workload point of view, but what's their behaviour doing for everyone else in the workplace that's watching this guy and creating this problem for you? And your stress levels are higher, and it allows them to just see it's a non-legal discussion. It's this kind of, it's almost like counselling, and that's what we do, and that's what MyHR offers the small and medium business, which is what a good in-house HR team should be offering to their line managers. And it's that stuff. It's not quoting sections of the Act. It's not relying on strict legal process. It's a conversation. It's a weighing up of business risk and human relationships and allowing that business owner to make a call and then helping them through.
And I would expect that a lot of your clients, some like people frequently would come to me and feel that they simply cannot, just on the investigations kind of theme, you know, they cannot simply be impartial because they, you know, there's been a complaint of bullying made against someone who they feel quite quite fondly for both parties. So to have you as a sounding board, not necessarily a lawyer, although we can be clearly very objective at times, must surely be helpful. I've got, you know, clients just want to be told. From an objective person what to do. That might not necessarily be the right answer. There might not be a right or a wrong, but to have that sounding board is probably worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, totally. And your point around impartiality is key. To go back to the earlier question around thresholds and things, if there's no impartiality, we will say you need a lawyer in here. You're the business owner and the complaint's about you. You cannot investigate that. Or you are the business owner with your wife or your husband and the complaint is about them. You are not impartial or objective here. You cannot do this complaint, you know. So there are some clear lines where we just pick up the phone. And impartiality is one of them. And they value that from us and as they value it from you because we're not tied up in the emotion, relationships and politics of their company.
Absolutely.
So just in terms of the independent investigations, are you seeing this as a more common way of people dealing with employment disputes and disciplinary matters, especially in the area of bullying and harassment?
Yes. So it's becoming more common on the back of the frequency of the serious events, you know. And so what I think, and it remains to be seen, but we go through this time and people get used to the investigation model, and hopefully as we all settle down and behaviour levels out a bit, I think the investigation model might stick around because they go, okay, this works actually. I can get someone in. I don't have to do it because I'm busy running my company as a whatever it may be, as a dental practice, as a doctor's surgery, as a web design agency, as a building company, and that can happen over here, and I can demonstrate complete arm's length. And so I think. Investigations will probably stick around on the back of the learning that a lot of these companies have taken from running them at this time. I think right now the spike is a direct result of the escalation of issues and the seriousness of those issues.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the fact that it's so vexed. I mean, there haven't been many times where I could think that you could reasonably expect an employer, like you said, the web designer, the photographer, to actually have some sort of civil trial. What is the sort of weighing of credibility of two accounts in some sort of isolated incident to then come to the conclusion that's going to be balanced and robust. I think it's just such a hard ask for a lot of small business owners.
And totally. Sometimes those disputes are like lifelong friends.
Yeah.
They've worked together and they started their trucking business and one was the owner and one was the first employee, and then it all just falls apart. You can't objectively manage that at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in terms of investigations, that guidance from your perspective to say, look, let's instruct this out, other than knowing when to basically call on someone, what are some other pitfalls that you often see come up where people are taking the wrong step?
The first is they just rush into it headlong and then come to us with the response. So one of my employees came in and said this thing, and I ran out and talked to everyone, and here are all my notes. You're going, right, okay, let's so first of all, just slow down. The other thing is this distinction, without playing semantics and getting silly with wording, but the distinction between kind of an investigation and a chat, and then a bit of discovery. So it's a de-escalation at the start to try and take a breath and objectively assess. So the employee comes forward with what appears to be a fairly alarming complaint or set of circumstances, and your immediate reaction is to dive in and do stuff, because that's what small business owners do. They don't have layers of departments. There's no one to ring. It's I do it. I fix the tap when it's leaking. I order the groceries. I help my team. I drive the truck, whatever it is. You're part of the business, right? So their natural tendency is to do the same. Okay, I'll write it all down and I'm going to go talk to him and him and him and her and figure out what's going on, and then I'm going to knock some heads. It's like, no. Take the deep breath and then start with that human chat, and then you can ask some kind of very important questions around, well, how did this make you feel, and when did it happen, and get some data and info about it, and then share that with us, and then we can pretty quickly, based on our read, give you a steer on what's needed, and because if it's investigation in the formal sense, we will always get them to outsource that in some way, unless they're a big enough enterprise, maybe they're 100 staff or 80 staff, and there's genuinely a manager who is experienced and impartial. But for the most part, where it's formal investigation, if it goes down that path, we do have some guidelines, absolutely. Here are the questions to ask. Here's how you run it. Here's what you need to avoid, things you don't say. This is the purpose of the investigation, you know. So you're not here to try and catch people out. You're not a police person. You are here for these purposes.
I would expect there's probably a continuum of how a person in a small business would deal with a dispute. Start being not really realising how bad things can get and being overconfident, and then there'll be a next step when they do realise how bad things could get, and then they're a possum in the headlights. Like, oh my God, I can't do anything. Do I send this guy? So having that sort of pathway through the process is going to take a lot of stress out of people's lives. I would expect. And that, look, without
overplugging MyHR, I'm sorry, but that's just the gap we saw. It's like they're either paralysed by fear because it had gone really badly wrong once before, and now effectively you could argue the business owner is the one that's getting bullied because this person's being allowed to do whatever they like and they don't know how to act. Or to your point, they're ignorant about what it may be and they just bowl into this awful risky situation. This role that we fulfil is that circuit breaker. Have the chat, and if we're saying get a lawyer, They go, okay, I will. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, you get it. You've got a read on it. We trust you, and this is great.
And they feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we go, look, you can manage this to a level by yourself. Here's how you take those steps. And it's that service that we saw didn't exist that we've put in.
And so, what is success for your clients? Like, is it avoiding personal grievances, or is it more than that? Like, how would you define success?
Yeah.
Big question.
Yeah, it is a big question, and it's sort of different for the different clients.
Yeah.
So the profile of our clients is vastly different depending on their industry, location, stage of life.
Yeah.
So for some, it is 100%, as you described, risk reduction.
Yeah.
That they can look back and go, we had this many grievances every year forever, and that was just our life. We were just fighting all the time. And we've seen a noticeable reduction, and we can count that. It's gone from 10 to none, that kind of thing. So it is 100% a risk mitigation thing. One, which is a little harder to quantify, but the business owners know it's been achieved, is that is less stress and worry for them.
Yeah.
I'm not waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning anymore worrying about this or concerned about this or hearing on the radio a change to employment law, not knowing what it means and wondering if I need to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this reduction of worry that our clients will talk about. I'm not so stressed about this anymore. So hard one to quantify, but nevertheless it's there.
Important.
And then there's the growing pains group. So, and it's for startups particularly, going back to our first few questions, is those businesses that start with 5, raise capital and are going to have 50 in 6 months. That's a crazy growth trajectory. And hiring 45 people in 6 months may not be a big deal if you're the warehouse group, but 5 to 50 is, in terms of a ratio kind of multiplier, massive. You apply that ratio to the warehouse group, and suddenly you're talking about 23,000 to 2.3 million or something like that. So you put that in context, you see the growth, and you can see why that proportionally that is massively painful for those startup people. And we just help with that, transacting that high rate of hiring, allowing for that period up to 19 where you can use the trial period to quickly exit those bad eggs, because you're hiring so quick, you're definitely going to make some mistakes. And when you tip over to 20, that there's a decent probationary period in place and a good onboarding plan. So you're catching all those things around onboarding people into your organisation, buy into the vision, buy into the growth, buy into the way it works in a startup, because that's really important in induction, especially if you're pulling people out of corporate. It's like, we've got great vision and we got $10 million in the bank. You turn up and it's chaos. It's just because it's all on. And so having a decent structure around your onboarding and engagement is, so for them success is minimizing the bad hires, quickly exiting the good ones, and allowing that growth from 5 to 50. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm totally sold. I don't know about you, Alice.
Thank you.
I think it's awesome what you do.
Cheers, thanks.
Yeah.
So how big can MyHR get? Because there's so many businesses in that size range. Are you the next Xero or?
That's the plan. Yeah. So we and whether we IPO or not, I don't know. My business partner's like, nah. And I'm going, it'd be cool just to be the first Kiwi HR company to list. I think that'd be fantastic. But irrespective of whether we IPO, our scale is as big as we want it to be. And I know this because of my experience in Australia and the UK and here. As you say, that small and medium enterprise sector is huge. As long as we're operating in your sort of common law countries, the process is fundamentally the same. So legal jurisdiction concern isn't that great. So we're New Zealand and Australia, where we will launch in Canada next year, and then we have Singapore and the UK pegged after that. We'll leave the US for a bit because of their highly litigious nature and state structure, but those markets are massive. Our ability to scale, so when you get investors and people like that looking at you, they love to tell me, oh, well, you should just ditch the human bit and do the tech, because you can't scale with these people. I disagree, and I disagree because that is our USP. No one does the human bit like we do. And in fact, our human piece is enabled by the tech. So that back-end piece of software that I talked about that is unique to us, which is this HR workflow management software effectively, or practice management software, as you might think about it in law. One of our plays is to take that and sell that to enterprise HR teams and go, you know what, you can operate with the same level of efficiency that we are doing across multiple small businesses in your large corporate. And so in addition to our small medium growth here, Australia, Canada and beyond, we have now an enterprise angle as well. So yeah, and I'm at 27,000 employees currently in the MyHR system and 2,000 odd clients. My last role at Woolworths, we looked after around 135,000 people across 900 sites. And so I'm not yet even at the scale I was. So I'm not frightened by the growth vision, and I see the possibility. I think people that don't know HR think, oh my gosh, that's how do you do that? How is that possible? It's totally possible. And so yeah, we have global aspirations, and we will meet them.
Oh, good on you. That's really exciting. So if a business is thinking about getting involved, subscribing to MyHR, myhr.com.
It's myhr.works. W-O-R-K-S. Yeah. So we got the universal URL. And we chose that one because we like the connotations, the sort of double sort of meaning there. .com is actually, myhr.com is owned by the Accor Hotel Group, who have an internal system called MyHR. So we're like, I'll leave them to it. Yeah. So myhr.works, it will geolocate you, so wherever you are, it will figure out if you're in New Zealand employment law or Australian employment law, and all the info's there. There's a bunch of free stuff. You can get an idea of our style, our webinars, our white papers, our blogs are all there. You can get a bunch of free guidance if you just want to DIY it, but I'd encourage you to get in touch. You can set up a trial account so you immediately get visibility of the software, and then our team will get in touch. Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. Oh, well, thanks for coming and sharing all your tips.
Oh no, thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Yeah. No, cheers, Jason.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jason. And I think if you're willing to come back, we'd love to have you on again to talk about some of those other issues in employment. And it's obviously a really great talker. So
yeah,
and employment law is always changing. So
it is. Yeah, and heck, if we get fair pay agreements, who knows where we're going to go.
Should not talk about politics.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us for Off the Record. See you next time.